Noticing the time at 7:30 in the presence of a quorum, I now call the Finance Committee to order. And the first item is public comment. If there's no public comment, I'm going to defer to Thomas for his presentation, but we'll start with public comment.
Hi. Sorry. John Mangiarotti, Town Manager. As a member of the general public at large and an employee in this building, I just wanted to thank the Finance Committee for participating in the budget workshops last week. It was about 9 hours of work that you put in, and I appreciate your efforts to try to understand and dig into the work that we're doing. And if there was any questions that you felt weren't answered, I welcome them either as follow-ups directly to me or some other way. But it's an important part of the budget process, and I truly appreciate you giving us the opportunity. And I'm really proud of the presentations. So proud, in fact, that I asked ActonTV to isolate them and save them so that we can share them otherwise, because I think they put a lot, the department heads put a lot into it. So thanks again for the opportunity, and I look forward to the rest of the budget process.
Thank you. The team did a great job, and the budget book is very helpful. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Finance Committee members. As you know, I'm Tom Beechin, I'm the Deputy Town Manager. I'm here to give a presentation with a team behind me who I'm going to welcome up to the table now on the Town Hall HVAC and Emergency Power Replacement Project. So we have a slide deck that we'll run through, but before I do that, I'd like to introduce the team here. Let me just hop out of here. So starting all the way down on my left is Ann Davies and Tom Iskra, both from Salas O'Brien. They're the project designer. Next to me is Brian, Brian DeFilippis, who is our owner's project manager from PMA. To my right is Dan Willett, the facilities manager for the town. And at the end of the table is David Martin, select board member. I will bring up the presentation now. So as I'm doing, and Andrea Becerra, the sustainability director, is joining us remotely, who will be helping us with the presentation as well. So we are here to present the HVAC and emergency power replacement project for Town Hall. As you're all aware, the system in this building is pretty antiquated. It's about 30-something years old. The fan coil units continuously fail, and the building's unable to keep a typical temperature, which we'll talk more about throughout this presentation. So we'll go through the current conditions of the buildings, and then we'll talk about the design solutions from Salas O'Brien. We'll talk about the project costs that'll be presented at town meeting, drill down a little bit more into gas versus electric and why this is a beneficial project for the town. And then we'll go through the anticipated project schedule, building laydown, impacts of the facility, and then we'll wrap it up with some potential relocation plans that we have for Town Hall. So I'll start off with kicking it over to Dan to talk about the current conditions of the building.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening, members of the Finance Committee. So current conditions, right now our boiler is a Wheel McLean gas-fired boiler. It was installed in 2008, so we're coming up on 20 years old. It utilizes two 1/6 horsepower pumps to move water throughout the building. Currently, the only way to control the temperature in the building during what we call the shoulder season, so fall and spring, is to turn the boiler on and off. So I have no control over actual temperature. I can just turn the boiler on, warm the building up, and then turn it off and let it cool back down again. The boiler also requires a seasonal switchover and a draining of the system. So once that system is shut down and drained for the season, we can no longer provide heat. We're only in cooling at that point in time. Piping and fan coil units. Most of the current piping and insulation is from 1988. Much of the insulation has mold present on it, as you can see in the pictures, due to condensation and leaks over the years, and many of the fittings and joints are starting to deteriorate just due to age. Fan coil units are also from the 1988 renovation. Many of the components are becoming difficult to source due to the age of the units themselves. For instance, the unit on the wall right behind Ellie right now is not functional because the coil in it cracked and that coil needs to be custom made by a fabricator in New Jersey. They're the only one that can build these. We no longer can just source these off the shelf from Trane. The chiller was replaced in fall of 2014 and early 2015. Current system consists of a 40-ton compressor chiller unit and an air-cooled condensing unit. The system utilizes 4 1.5 horsepower pumps, 2 primary and 2 backup, to move water throughout the building. Again, same as the heating system. Once this system is turned off for the year in September, we can no longer provide cooling to the building. So we do have some days in early to even sometimes late fall where the building gets pretty warm and we're not able to cool it down. And the building management system, also known as a BMS. So current system is outdated and inadequate, to put it politely. It does not allow facility staff to adjust or control space temperatures throughout the building. So all it really allows us to do is see water temperatures, and its functionality essentially stops there. We can set an occupied and unoccupied schedule, but to this point, I'm not 100% sure what that will actually do for us, because much of the hardware has been disconnected and bypassed over the years to allow the boiler and chiller to continue functioning. So as a part would fail, it would just get bypassed out of the system and no longer read into the system anymore. And you can see in the top picture there, everything on that screen is zeroed out. So we're not actually reading anything there. It's just kind of there. And then on the bottom, we can see water temperatures, but outside of that, I can't open or close valves or do anything with the system itself. The system is also unsupported. So Brunel Controls no longer supports this version of that system. And that is it for our current conditions. Let's send it over to the folks from Salis.
Thank you, Dan. As mentioned, my name is Tom Iskra, and this is Ian Davies. We're both from Salis O'Brien, so we're the design firm that's been selected by the town a little over a year ago or so. We had previously been engaged a few years ago to do a town-wide study, and excited to be back to actually see an implementation project here of decarbonization of this building, which certainly is needed, as mentioned, through the existing conditions analysis. Next slide. We'll also talk about the design goals as we were selecting is to convert these buildings to all electric, and we'll talk about the options available for that. The building management system was a priority that we identified and the town identified, so we've got some replacement options for a new BMS system. And the other thing that wasn't mentioned earlier is the generator. There's been a generator failure. There's a temporary generator out on the yard here to the side, and so looking to replace that to provide some resiliency to the power of the building. In addition to our Salis O'Brien team, we have a consultant team with Arrow Street Architects, Cost Estimator PMNC, Code Red is our code consultant, survey was done by Feldman, and Hazmat by AEC. So the alternatives that we looked at to replace the existing fossil fuel burning gas boilers and the existing chillers are an air source heat pump, which draws heat from the air and rejects heat to the air through site-mounted equipment, or through a geothermal ground source heat pump, which uses wells basically drilled in the earth to store heat and pull heat through the different seasons. So we analyzed those two options in a conceptual study, which the next slide starts to outline a few of the advantages and disadvantages that we presented to this committee, to the town for evaluation before proceeding into later stages of design. As mentioned, those air source heat pumps, the advantages of an air source heat pump is a lower first cost, less complex and less disruptive installation. However, the disadvantages are larger exterior equipment with some noise and aesthetic concerns to address, and also loss of efficiency at extreme cold temperatures. Alternatively, another all-electric replacement for these gas boilers and heating systems is a geothermal ground source heat pump. The advantages there is there's less exterior above-grade equipment, greater energy efficiency results, and higher rebate incentives for them. However, the disadvantages, it's a costly and noisy drilling operation during construction. It requires dedicated commitment to location of a bore field somewhere on site, and requires more upfront capital with incentives and reimbursements coming at the end. So at the concept phase, when we evaluated those first costs, it was about $1 million first cost difference between geothermal and air source heat pump. And for that reason and some of the other reasons identified here, the town selected to move forward with air source heat pumps, which is what we proceeded for. Yes.
So, is there any backup? Commercial air source heat pumps, like when do they start becoming less efficient? Is it like -15?
Well, I'll let Ian speak to that one.
Oh, we're at the end of the, that was it. I'd say it varies on the manufacturer, but
Okay.
generally at around 10, 15 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, okay,
is when you start to
positive.
see.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
They'll continue to operate
But it's super inefficient.
down to negative temperatures, but they lose efficiency.
Does there need to be backup, like another backup heat source? Or is there another backup heat source in this contemplated?
Yeah, so the air source system that we have designed includes redundancy. So if you lose, so it's an all air source heat pump system, but it's kind of designed for an N+1 redundancy. So if you lose a module, you've got a backup modules. So if one goes down and needs to be worked on, the other two, I think we'll get to a little bit more detail here in a minute, but the idea is you can be fully heating your building while you're repairing one module.
Got it. So there doesn't need to be gas or oil backup of
Yeah,
some sort?
these
It
are
can-
rated for very low temperatures. Again, they will run inefficiently, almost like an electric boiler at that point. But those days occur so infrequently that the trade-off is not there to then spend the upfront capital cost for a separate electric boiler.
Understood.
But it's a risk decision for the town,
Yep.
how much belts and suspenders you would like to have.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, so ultimately what was accepted into the scope of work for the project are those air source heat pumps, which is that source of heating and cooling for the building. Along with converting to all electric, we had to upgrade the main electrical service, which was also aging. And so that's slightly upsized electrical service, including new transformer and distribution to new panels. As mentioned, that new exterior emergency generator, which we're gonna put in roughly the same location in a new enclosure for sound attenuation and aesthetics. A new BMS control system we'll detail exactly the locations, but a new mechanical room with pumps, heat exchangers, and HVAC accessories to make those function inside the building. We have new resized fan coil units in each room where there's currently a fan coil unit that they're going to be running on lower temperature hot water. So currently the building runs on an elevated temperature hot water. These heat pumps produce slightly lower temperatures because they're more efficient, but just you need slightly larger fan coil units in same locations to be able to put the same kind of output of heat. As Dan showed pictures of some of the piping insulation that's in some of the ceiling locations here, those will be removed, remediated, and replaced with new piping insulation throughout. And as we impacted certain areas of the building, we've triggered some accessibility upgrades, namely in some of the public bathrooms. Per our code analysis and discussions with local officials, we've identified a few bathrooms and items that had to be upgraded per Massachusetts Accessibility Board requirements, and so those are included in the project scope as well. So as far as the footprint here, Ian will describe some of the locations in the building we're affected.
Yeah, so not too much impact to the building, as Tom kind of mentioned. I think, visually, when you're on the ground floor, that's kind of where the the most impact is. So down outside in the top right of the image is the new equipment enclosure. So it's in the same location as the existing split chiller that Dan had some pictures of earlier. So in that enclosure, we will be locating a new generator and the new air source heat pump. And then where the existing generator is in the top right corner there, that's going to be our new electrical room. So the space usage type doesn't vary too much. I think visually from the exterior, the biggest impact will be the new enclosure. In the core of the ground floor, in the middle there, we are converting the existing print room into the new mechanical room. So we will be relocating the printers to the back office space. I think it's room 013. It's kind of just across the hall there, and kind of tidying and making that mail room just a little bit smaller there on the left side. The existing mechanical room will be converted to a storage space. And also what you can kind of see here is there's a little bit of reconfiguration of the existing unisex bathroom on the ground floor for those ADA upgrades that Tom was mentioning. The other main visual impact throughout the building will be the new fan coil units, which will be, in addition to more efficient, a little bit quieter.
I think I'm next. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm presenting a list of the town hall weatherization improvements. So weatherization improvements at town hall will be funded through the town's energy efficiency fund. And these funds were approved by the select board. The work is anticipated to be completed in the spring of this year. The list includes air sealing, attic insulation, attic stair insulation, rear slope insulation, wall insulation, door weather stripping, all of which is estimated at $83,450, excluding National Grid incentives, which are currently under review. These upgrades are expected to reduce the building's energy use by 5 to 10%, which will be critical for a more efficient use of the HVAC system.
Project costs. So as you saw in the budget book and previous conversations about FY27 capital, the project estimated cost for this building is $3.75 million. The breakdown of that, we have 8 items here called out. Overall construction is estimated at $2,404,158. That includes demolition throughout the building, includes replacement of the fan coil units, purchase of the new air source heat pumps, installation of those, preparation of spaces for those, the brand new generator. So it's quite a bit included in that construction cost. The other item is hazardous material remediation. Dan had shown some photos of some mold and remediation issues with pipes and other areas throughout the building, and that's covered here. Then we get into different costs that are all associated with projects. Escalation and contingency, because this cost estimate was done in the design development phase, which was completed in November. There's an escalation cost associated with that so that we have more accurate pricing with an expectation that construction will begin in the fall. And then contingency is for both the design and the cost contingency. General conditions for contractors, bonds, insurance, overhead and profit. Bidding contingency, we're carrying about a 7.25% right now. And then services for both our designer and our owner's project manager to help us get through the project is associated or included here. So that rolls up to $3.75 million. Would this cost less than a gas system? In short, no. And we'll go into that in a couple slides coming up. The first factor in making that statement is the fact that we're receiving $1 million grant to install this type of system, to install this electric-based HVAC system inside the building. That lowers the overall project cost to $2.75 million. Additionally, we're not factoring in any utility incentives that we would receive. We're not totally sure what that number is because there's no commitment from the utility, but we do anticipate it being significant to help further drive down the cost. So those costs are leading us to the belief that this system is going to cost less than a gas system. When we look at a gas system, our estimated incentives and reductions in cost are roughly $400,000. So we're saving quite a bit of money by going with an electric system. What I would do is pass it over to David to go through some of the comparison of energy sources as well.
Hi, good evening. So this is a comparison of the equipment that would be needed to heat the building with gas versus the equipment that heat and cool the building, basically with electricity, on the left and the right. Note that the heating and cooling equipment here is only 10 to 20% of the whole project cost. It's not a 90% of the whole project cost or something like that. Down at the bottom is the summary, right? So this costs $420,000 more for heat pumps. But note, as was stated earlier in this presentation, that the heat pump installation actually provides a higher level of redundancy in the heat. We can lose a whole unit and still heat the building. And then with the deduction that for the $1 million incentive, that reverses and it saves $580,000 or so. And just to also reiterate what Tom said, the utility incentives are not included in here. They're probably going to be six figures, but they're not nailed down yet. Next slide, please. So this is the comparison of the operating costs. So the stuff that's in the lower left is just the assumptions that are used to make these computations. The real computation is in the lower right. So in this building, we've used on average over the past 4 years, $15,570 of gas each year to heat the building. That turns out to be roughly 63,000 kilowatt hours, and which would cost $21,260, which is 37% more than the electricity cost. But a couple of things. First of all, I want to say that these assumptions here and things are pretty conservative. There are lots of things that would make this become more favorable. But I want to note a couple of things. One of the main reason why electricity is more expensive here, as you found out during the budget discussion, is that we have secured a low-price gas contract, right? If the town had to pay what you guys pay in your houses for gas, the electricity to heat the building would have been 3% cheaper instead of 37% more. So it's that low gas price that makes it different. And realize also that we didn't make any assumptions of what energy costs are going to be in the future. Right now, that contract is for 3 years. Whether we can secure one at that low cost again in 3 years, or whether we could extend that contract now for a little bit longer, that's something that's being considered, but certainly not something that's guaranteed. Second thing I want to point out here is that the savings in debt service for the $1 million grant more than covers the increased electricity cost. In fact, the increased electricity cost is only 12% of the debt service savings. So just roughly, the debt service savings are roughly said another the opposite way, is roughly 8 times the increased cost of electricity. That's it.
Okay, let's talk about the anticipated project schedule. So we've tried to outline the whole project as it stands Currently, Salas is completing the documents for the project. We're about 90% complete. Our commissioning agent has also reviewed the documents. We do now, next step is to do a 90% estimate reconciliation where we have an estimating firm, they have an estimating firm, then we meet in the middle and talk through items to really make sure that we're within budget. That will be anticipated in early March. We'll now then do a final code review, get ready for town meeting on May 4th, complete the drawings in May with an anticipated bid start in June. Staff will move out middle of August. We'll go through the proposed plan there in a little bit. And then we're anticipating a contractor notice to proceed in the end of August. Roughly construction duration about 7 months. Done in March of '27, and then all the staff will move back into the building once we're done. Next slide. Temporary construction staging, so you'll notice the yellow box there. That is what we're anticipating the contractor will need. Once we award the project, of course, we'll talk with that awarded firm to see what exactly their, method and practices to get the project done are, and that may change it slightly. But the big news is here is we're trying to keep open the EV spaces as they're accessible. And then, if we can use less space, so be it. So we're going to work with the contractor once they're awarded.
So Brian started discussing some of the anticipated impacts to the campus with construction staging area at the front of the building. Another big impact will be the overall operations inside of this building. A cost saver from this project that we realized early was a phased approach where we would still occupy the building and just move staff around, which would create more of an expense to be able to give temporary conditions to the contractors as they work their way through the building. We decided on the town side, along with PMA and Salas, it would be more appropriate to relocate operations outside the building, which realizes about a $400,000 saving in the project cost. So some of the ideas for us to relocate, and these are all conceptual at this point, we're still working through final locations. The intent is to keep front-facing services on this campus as much as possible. So your bill collectors, your town clerk, the office staff who are dealing with people on a daily basis, the assessors, we want to make sure that when you visit this area, you're still able to receive those services. So one idea is the Red House. The other idea is looking at some office spaces at the Memorial Library for Dan and the facilities team. We're looking at utilizing remote work more often, looking at 50 Audubon at the Recreation Center and 30 Sudbury as well. Public meetings like this, where do they go? We're considering looking at the Acton Memorial Library meeting room, using some space at 50 Audubon, 30 Sudbury, and then for those boards who are able to meet virtually, we would be encouraging that throughout the project as well. So that's our presentation. It's a lot of information, but we wanted to provide you with as much of an overview as we go along. We're happy to answer questions and drive more into the details of the presentation as well.
I have like a couple quick questions. I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to ask all of them. I want to let the team ask questions, but, so I'm just going to keep my initial questions to these two. For the installation, why are we doing R19 instead of R30?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, to be completely honest.
My very simplistic understanding of installation is the higher the number, the better you are. And when I had my house worked on and I was told that I had R8 and it would get replaced by R30, I saw a significant difference, and we're spending a lot of money to put R19 in here. Well, I ask my second question, and you can respond to my two, because David, you're going to want to answer my next question as well. Since we're redoing the electrical for the building, my very, very limited understanding of solar panels is that it requires electrical work. Why wouldn't we incorporate solar panels as part of this project and try to get tax credits and all those credits that are associated when you do that type of work, since we're already touching the entire electrical for the whole building? I'm sure, David, you probably have an answer for both of those.
So the first one, I think we'll probably end up with more than R19 in the attic of this building, but we're limited by the thickness of the walls that were made in 1863. So we can't make the walls
You
wide.
can blow it in.
No, but we can't make the
foam?
walls wider.
Foam is denser than this other stuff. I had it in my own house. I know there's a difference.
So usually what you blow in is cellulose. And that's almost always the case. You can put foam in if you have access, but, and also depending on where you're doing it and things to foam off gases. So usually what's blown in is cellulose. And that has a rough, same insulation as fiberglass. And then you can put more in the attic. But again, we're limited by the thickness of the walls. You can only get so much insulation in the walls.
Could you say what the thickness of the wall is, since you're referencing it?
So we can try to find you an answer for that. It's weird in this building because there are timbers in the walls
Yeah.
and things like that. So we can try to find out.
Yeah, so what thickness prohibits you from increasing the insulation rating? Is it an inch, or 2 inch, 3 inches? So that was the answer I'd be looking for.
So I think a 3.5 inches of wall thickness is R19. I'd have to look that up. So
right, then-
that's the thickness of a 2x4. So if you have a 2x4 building, no modern houses are built with 2x4s. They're built with at least 6-inch thick walls. And so you can get more insulation in them. But if you have an older house like mine, it has 2x4 walls.
I have an older house, and I have R30 in my walls.
We can look up.
I just
insulation.
want to understand the question.
What I'd
And
like to do, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what I'd like to do is connect with Andre after, and we
Yeah,
can get
that's
the
perfect.
proposal from the contractor who
Thank you.
is the basis for the weatherization and get that information to you.
Yeah, and then the other question, and then we'll go to other people.
Andrea probably can answer that solar question.
So we did consider solar, and it's in our electrification roadmap study. It was assessed, but we have set it aside for the moment because it's always been viewed as a historic district, an important building for historic purposes, and solar hasn't really come up as a priority for that reason. So it's not a priority right now, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't install it in the future.
Okay, so just a question. So in the future, because I've never installed solar, so if you did solar in the future, do you have to deal with all the electrical? Am I misunderstanding how that stuff works? Do you have to tie it back into all the electrical work? Do you know?
Yeah, we did it at our house. It's one little wall wart on the outside of the wall and ties back in, so it's not like you have to rework things
So
on
it's
the
nothing.
outside.
Okay,
It's just an external
thank you.
switch.
All right. All right, I'll defer to other questions from my committee. Anybody? Corinne?
Hi. Okay, so the boiler is from 2008, it said, and the chiller from 2014 and 15. So those aren't that old, right? They are old? Really? Yes. Really? No, I'm serious, because I mean, like, the stuff in my house is way older. I'm just, yeah.
Oil lasts way longer than gas,
Oh,
in my
okay.
experience.
20 years for a gas-fired boiler is a pretty significant amount of time.
Okay, and what about the chiller?
Same thing. They start to kind of break down and deteriorate after about 15 years or so.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that's something to look forward to, I guess. And the my house, right? And the building management system, how old is that? And is that something that ages?
I couldn't find an answer on that. I've only been with the town for 6 months, but from all the digging.
So it's at least 6 months old?
It's at least 6 months old. No,
Okay.
but from all the digging I did, I couldn't come up with a solid answer
Okay.
on how old that system is.
I guess what I'm kind of going with is like, how long is this stuff going to last?
That would be a question for the fellows.
So the new equipment, I think the air source heat pump ASHRAE service lives, they're new, so they're not fully defined, but I think at least 20 years, at least longer, for the new mechanical systems. But we'll also have the ability, because it's going to be a modular system, it's not a full swap out if it needs a replacement. So that kind of can theoretically extend the service life.
Okay.
And then the new building management system, that's software. So that's, it's going to be cloud-based, and as long as the server is online somewhere, we'll have access to it.
Okay. So the cost savings that you were showing, you were comparing, I think, the electric to air source heat pump, and it said like 600, can you bring the slide back up so I can have the real numbers? It was like 600,000 versus 300,000, but then you were saying it's about 16,000 a year that we pay for gas now, something like that? You know what I'm talking about? So I'm just wondering, like, how many years of electricity was that? Before this? Here. No, before this. There, so the 365,000, or say the 265 gas estimate versus the 613 electric estimate.
Right, so that's $419,000 more, right? And with the grant, it's negative $581,000, right? And the electricity only costs $6,000 more a year. So the electricity does not use as much as we save in debt service from having the grant.
Okay. So that's, again, over how many years? That's
Oh, no, that is the upfront cost. And but both of those are upfront costs.
Okay.
And so both of those would be bonded over 30 years.
Okay, so we're not even talking about annual cost yet then?
No, the annual
Is it-
cost is on the next slide.
Okay.
And there's a 37%.
Right, the 6,000 a year. Okay.
It's basically $21,000 versus $15,000 a year.
Okay, and then go up a couple more, sorry. That one, yep, there. Where's the 3.2 million?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're referring to the 3.2 million that was referred to by Salas and O'Brien in the
Yeah.
air source heat pump?
Yeah, so that was at concept phase when we were investigating the scope of work, comparing apples to the geothermal. Between the concept phase and the design development phase, which is sort of 2 stages later, there were additional costs, additional scope items that were factored in. So the reason I put 3.2 versus 4.2 was to compare the two options together. It wasn't
Okay.
necessarily the final cost. There was other things like remediation costs and accessibility, things that kind of came up between early concept plan to the time we got here, so that the dollar amount changed from 3.2 to 3.7. Does that make sense?
No.
So,
But
go ahead.
So,
No problem.
so originally, so the 3.2 is now 3.75?
Exactly.
Because it's been 3.75 for like 4 years now, since the plan that came out a few years ago. It's always been 3.75. So that's why I'm confused. Anyway, it just seems like we're backing into this 3.75 all the time. What about the backup generator? Is that in there?
Corinne,
Is that the- yes.
I'm sorry, if I could clarify one thing. The 3.2 number does not include designer services, OPM services, bidding contingencies. So when you add those to it, it's a pretty comparable number. I don't have it all added up, but that 3.2 number, and Tom can clarify a little bit more, has a little bit more meat on the bone than just the construction cost.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me that there is soft costs associated in this 3.75 to get you to a total project cost, whereas the 3.2 was more just the.
No, I thought the 3.2 was just like just the system, and then you had all these other things, remediation and all the other stuff. That's why I was wondering, was it like, should the 2.4 have been 3.2, is what I was getting at, I was wondering. But you're saying, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
And then is where's the backup generator? Because we need a bigger backup generator than we have now, right?
Great question. So the new generator will be included in the construction cost there. That 2.4.
And the 2.4?
Yep, the 2.4 number includes a lot of different things and primarily driven by the cost of the new generator, the new HVAC system, and then all the work that goes along with it.
Okay, and I have one more question, and I'll be done. What has to be done to the existing systems or ductwork or whatever in this building? What has to be done differently than by using gas? Do we have to do anything different?
Sure, I'll tackle that. So right now, your gas boiler in your mechanical room produces hot water that's distributed through piping to all the fan coil units. And your chiller that's outside produces chilled water that then ties into the same distribution system in a two-pipe changeover. That's what Dan was referring to. So a lot of that distribution downstream of that connection is going to stay in this building, out to all these fan coil units. So we're not ripping up piping distributed out. We're just going to replace the unit itself, the fan coil units itself, and replacing the source and keeping a lot of that distribution pipe work. Same thing with your duct work. You have a couple units like in the basement, attic, or not attic, and ceiling of the lower level. There's a unit that's above the ceiling that has hot water and chill water coils. But then on the downstream side of that air handler, all that ductwork's going to stay the same and same distribution. We're going to redo some insulation, but that type of distribution is staying. So the beauty with this is we're sort of changing out the source and changing out some of the terminal equipment, but trying to reuse as much as possible in
All
between.
right, thank you.
To lower costs.
Thanks.
I have an old house with an old gas heating system and recognize a lot of what you're talking about with measuring heat in different areas and everything. So I completely now understand the need for this. Right now, getting over to the generator, what is the fuel source for that? Is that going to be tied into the gas line?
It'll have a diesel belly tank underneath it.
Okay. It would be helpful, I think, make sure I have understood this. It will cost us, in running cost, more for the electric, but not much more, and we're making that up with our lowered borrowing cost. Is that a correct summary?
That would be correct.
Okay. When we explain it to people, it's really easy for the brain to disconnect those two, so please make sure to include that in the, just sort of when you put more information out there about it.
Thank you.
Fred, do you have any, we'll just go this way. You have any-
Yeah, one more from me. David, why can't we get I don't know, some sort of agreement on our per kilowatt hour rate or something like that? I would have to imagine we could negotiate something lower.
Yeah, Andrea's probably better to answer that as well.
So we do currently have an agreement with a separate provider, Constellation, at 15 cents. That's a little lower than the Acton Power Choice Green program because we do purchase 100% green power. This was something the select board voted on a long time ago, a few years ago. And it's outlined in the climate action plan. We could go out to bid for a lower cost and save about 5 cents if we decided not to pursue that 100% renewable energy credit.
Well, 15 cents per kilowatt hour is more than half. I think you were using 34 cents in your estimate.
So
That includes, yeah, go ahead, David.
the number
Distribution.
that Andrea referred to is just the generation cost, the supply cost. When the 34 cents kilowatt hour includes 16 cents a kilowatt hour supply or generation cost. The rest is delivery cost.
Yep. Okay, got it.
I'm sorry. What is the noise difference going to be with the air source heat pump out? I'm thinking of the neighbors. I do not expect to hear it from my house, but we really need to talk to people if I'm going to be able to hear it from my house. I'm just wondering if it has been cleared or the people around here have been spoken to about the change that's coming.
Yes, so we, as part of our study, we do have an acoustical consultant that was brought on board to measure current decibel levels in the area and making sure we're not materially changing that. And as part of the recommendations is this new enclosure, which is essentially an open box that's going to be created around this so that any kind of noise dissipates straight up. It's actually taller than the height of the equipment, and that based on their calculations for the nearest abutter, We evaluated what the decibels levels would be, and they're within the town's ordinances for that distribution. So that specific detail is available to be shared with the committee or anyone who's interested, and we'll be able to present that.
Do you know what time of day that was done?
I
So
don't
the readings, so I live 2 houses down, which is why I was talking about hearing it from my house. It is silent here at night once the traffic stops. But if it was done during the day with the traffic going by, completely different volume. So I would just hope that it was done at the silent time when people are sleeping, et cetera, to minimize the difference.
Yeah, we, acoustical consultant left, they left data loggers for a couple days and then compiled that data to come up with the baseline sound level.
But you're not telling me that's an average, right?
It's not an average. They looked at different windows of time, but they collected all the data from over a couple days span.
We'd share that information with you. Maybe we can have some follow-up questions on that.
So the generator would be diesel. Why can't it run off of natural gas? You have the natural gas coming in, and natural gas, as we know, is a lot less pollutant than diesel.
There is a cost difference, first cost difference. Natural gas generator at this size tends to be more expensive than a diesel generator. There's also different interpretations by different authorities having jurisdiction about whether a gas supply is an uninterruptible supply. If this is part of your emergency system, then you need to have an uninterrupted supply, and gas lines can break, can fail, whatever. And so town by town, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, they have different interpretations of whether a generator on natural gas is considered uninterruptible supply compared to a diesel generator, which is there and available for you. So something to be maybe explored with your town, whether they're willing to accept that, but that's historically why we've chosen one path or another.
And how much diesel fuel will be stored?
I believe it's 24 hours. There's a calculation for how much time we need to store and what's appropriate tank size, but obviously the more you store, the larger the tank gets and the cost and that, but
Right.
we can double check on that.
And how big of a generator are we talking about? Because I know generators have to be permitted by DEP regulations.
Is it 125?
Yeah.
It's 125 kW generator. All the dimensions are there. That floor plan showed the footprint of it. And all the tank size information could all be provided in the documents that we have that are
So
just issued.
the one that's out there now, is that powered by diesel, do you know? Or do we know what it's powered
Yeah.
by? Diesel?
I believe it's diesel, and I believe it's probably smaller than what we're doing because we're trying to back up more than what you're currently backing up.
So are the newer generators more efficient than the older ones that's being replaced? Efficiency-wise?
In terms of gallons per hour, that kind of thing?
Yeah, like, so, this one sucks down X number of gallons per hour, and say the new one sucks down less. And
Yeah,
so,
well,
in other
so-
words, you wouldn't need a bigger tank, as much
Yeah.
stored on site, because, it's more efficient. And also, too, is that fuel has to be stored on site, and I'm assuming you have to put additives in, and as we know with equipment and runs diesel, and it's really cold out, diesel gels, right? So we've seen that with our DPW, so there's concerns with that too as well.
No, I think valid concern. So I think what you had in the building was an interior generator that failed, and then now you have a temporary exterior generator. So certainly the older the generator, less efficient than what we're doing. The temporary generator was not intended to be very long, so it's also probably just, what we're speccing is a commercial grade, sort of industry-wide acceptable generator that the performance requirements we can spell out for you, but I'm sure is likely better than what a temporary situation you have now. These generators, per their warranty requirements, have certain requirements to run it at various intervals to make sure that it's operating properly and it's continuing to be exercised. So you'll have regular maintenance intervals that where it's going to kick on for a little bit just to start up
Right.
and then keep going. So
Yeah.
hopefully that helps with some of the gas
And
issues too.
what's the life expectancy of that, of the generator? Is there, like, is it 20 years or is it longer?
But most of these are sort of in the 20 to 30-year range pieces of
Okay.
equipment that we're trying to spec, because you could always spec something more, but you're paying for it in upfront costs. And then it always depends on how you maintain it. So that's always the factor, that you've got some published guidelines that if you do the certain maintenance intervals that are recommended, you can get more life out of them, but
Thank you.
in that range.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions on the project duration. 7 months seems like a long time. Is there any difference, would it be any shorter if we were to just replace a gas-fired boiler? Because are we not interrupting as much of the changes in the walls? Or is it, do we have to change the things in the walls anyway because they're all old and corroded and et cetera?
There we go.
Yeah, I think the mold issues on all of the piping throughout the building need to be addressed. That's a health and safety issue. And that's invasive and extends throughout the building. So I'm not sure that the construction schedule would be vastly different.
Okay.
Is that and the fan coil units themselves are failing at the terminal points. So all that would have to be replaced. What you're probably saving on time-wise is the electrical service, that upgrade, although that could be sort of concurrent with all the other work going on. So we haven't done a critical path schedule analysis to see what is the driver of the duration, other than this seems to be an appropriate amount of time based on our collective industry and expertise as to what a project of this nature has done. And we've done a lot of these throughout the region.
Sounds like you're starting in September.
Correct.
So 7 months project starting in September, you're going to have to work all the way through the winter. That's less than ideal. Tom, is there any opportunity in the contract language with the OPM or with the builder to have a date certain for the end of the project? I fear mission creep and project delays, and if we're going to be evicting the vast majority of the workers from the building and taking over the entire parking lot, what can we do to ensure that this does not drag on?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So with any public project and contract, we have what's called liquidated damages, and what's estimated inside of, or what's included inside of that contract is an estimated duration of the project. And theoretically, once you've identified that, you're able to include a clause that holds the contractor to that date and that duration by then assessing liquidated damages for any time period that goes over that. With any project, especially in a building this age and this condition, there could be a lot of unforeseen circumstances that drive the project beyond that anticipated date. So we're estimating 6 to 7 months. We're anticipating up to 9 months. It's a construction project that's a pretty major renovation of this building, so there are some stuff that could be discovered once we get into the walls. We hope that's not so. We do have a mechanism through procurement that allows us to hold the contractor accountable for a schedule, but you know, we could hit up to 9 months.
As part of the discovery for all of this, have we done, you know, sort of test holes in the walls to look for asbestos, to look for the unexpected? I mean, it's one thing to say, you know, we could have surprises. It'd be much better if we do a little proactive checking to make sure that we're, to limit the chance of there being an oops surprise that makes this take 50% longer.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's been extensive testing inside the building as part of the project to be able to identify what the hazardous material was inside the building. So it's pretty well exhausted where it is and what we anticipate. The unexpecteds could come up with rotted wood, certain areas that need to be replaced and were not anticipated. It's just part of a construction project when you get into a building this age. But for remediation, it's been pretty extensive.
Okay.
I've been on this committee a long time. I remember the 2008 project. I can tell you that this building has never had a building management system. As far as the comparison of the electric and gas, so what's the net investment we're talking about on electric after the state grant? Is it, how many million?
The increment for going to heat pumps is 419,000.
No, I just want to know, in two cases, what's the net investment we're talking about if we stay with gas or if we went to electric?
So the borrowing authority we'd had, just doing this math in my head, we'd ask for electric is about 275, 2.750 thousand, right?
Okay.
Or 2.750 million. And if we did it in gas, it would be about, if we think about this, it would be 3,750 minus 419. Right? So it would be about 3.3 million, something like that.
I do just want to add one thing, and it's an unknown that we've noted before, but there are utility incentives that we'll receive through completing this project through the electrification and the HVAC replacement. That number will help drive down the 2.75 final construction cost number.
So the premise is that even though gas would cost less over 30 years than electric, that the investment difference more than makes up for the additional cost of the electricity?
Yes, in fact, that there's less upfront cost and less debt service cost in terms of, the interest costs. So we get both. And it's really unpredictable whether electricity or gas will be cheaper in 5 years.
Correct. That was my next point.
Right. That
You're
is-
making
that is
steady-state
really
assumption.
hard. So like I said, if right now, if you were doing this on a residential basis, you're paying more for gas than the town is and less for electricity than the town is, because there's a heat pump rate if you get electricity. That's 7 cents off the regular rate. So, and we don't know what the state's going to do in terms of regulation, and we don't know where gas prices will go in the future, and whether we could get a good price contract again.
We don't know where electric prices are going either, because the electrical infrastructure in this country is not big enough to handle all those people with electric cars.
Yes.
I have a question about the cloud-based building management system. Do we know who's hosting that? Is it the manufacturer that hosts the software?
Yeah, so we don't know who's hosting that because it's a Massachusetts public bid project. We'll list 3 equivalent manufacturers. So I believe right now we've got Schneider, ALC, and Johnson Controls listed in our specifications.
Do we do a risk assessment for purchasing that kind of software? Because, if it's hosted by a third party and we have no control over the servers or the service contract, with the servers to host the software, if they have some kind of outage and we can't control our building management system, that's really serious, right? Or if there's no way to locally manage the system during a time when they have an outage, there needs to be a risk assessment done for that.
So there's a web control interface that is cloud hosted. There's also a local network controller that can be, so you can kind of log into the BMS system from a cloud-based external service, or if you're within the building, you'll always be able to access it from in here.
Thank you.
All right, I have a couple more questions. First question, and I know you went through it, but I don't know if there was incentives. Are there incentives on the original 2 options and the option's been selected? Are there incentives with this, yes or no? Reference incentives?
Could you clarify by what you mean by the original
was a
2 options,
slide
the
that-
air source heat pumps and the geothermal?
Yeah, there was a
systems?
slide that was in the deck that had 2 options, and I was taking notes on it, and one of them referenced incentives. I guess really my question would be, if there's incentives, if whenever this is goes to print, if you could be very specific on what the incentives are, what the sources of the incentives are, because I don't know if we can trust that everything is being promised is going to be delivered by our government right now.
Scott, if I could just make a
Yeah.
quick comment on
Yeah.
that. And the incentives, as we've noted a couple times with this air source heat pump system, we're leaving that out of the cost savings associated with the project because it's an unknown. We don't know if it'll be what has been talked about before, where it's a couple $100,000. We don't know if it'll be less. When it comes to the geothermal ground source heat pumps, that was also discussed, that the incentives were a true unknown, so we weren't sure what we would save with the project. We also don't know if we would have received the $1 million grant for that project because we didn't apply for it. So when we look at the cost, we look at the air source heat pump system, both then and now, as being a more advantageous and cost-effective system to install because of those incentives and primarily because of that $1 million grant.
That leads to my second question, which is the $1 million grant.
Okay.
Are there any time restrictions or on that grant? So like if it's not committed by December 1st or some hypothetical date, then the grant's lost. Is there any time restriction on that grant?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
There is a 3-year commitment that you are moving forward on the project. So there is quite a bit of cushion.
All right, just want to make sure that we're not having a fire drill timeline on it. So 3 years sounds reasonable. My last question is for you guys. You say you have extensive experience with this, so I'm going to ask if you could give us locations, examples of people that are towns that have used these systems so that if we wanted to drive and listen to whatever's being proposed here, or pull the town financials to see their original project and their final cost. We have examples we can look at of a project that matches this someplace else that we can reference, ideally in the last couple of years, that we could look at. I don't need it today, but like if you have it off the top of your head, that'd be great.
Sure. We just recently, within the last year, completed the Carroll Community Center in town of Dover. And it was a former school building that's turned into a community center. They were all on oil burner boilers. They don't have gas in their town. And we converted them to an all air source heat pump solution. Dealt with a very similar committee like this with the town over the course of a couple of years, and that building's up and operational now. So you can go see it, you can go talk to the committee members, talk to the OPMs or whoever, and certainly provide that contact information for you. It was part of our qualification package to why we were selected by this town for this project.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Anybody? All right, thank you for your presentation. It was greatly appreciated.
Thank you for your time.
And did someone help promote Fred to a presenter? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Participants. I know I can, but I think he has to be promoted to a panelist, and then. All right. I'm going to do an intro for you, Fred. All right. So, not knowing what was going to happen with the DPW project this year, I had originally kind of labeled the project as two problems, a staffing problem and a equipment problem. And we've ended up down the path of solving the proposal that is currently, that was approved by the planning, what's the DPW Commission, primarily addresses the staffing issue, and it's repurposing the storage facility without ripping it down and rebuilding it. But I had asked Fred to kind of just do a deep dive into the equipment because we never really went down and did analysis on that because we ended up focusing on the staff only. And just in case we needed the data, I thought it'd be good to have someone look at it. So Fred's done a presentation, and here is his presentation.
Thank you, Scott. Is it going? How do I advance? Yes, I actually have to go to this screen. There we go. Quickly, just to couch this in a few bullet points, as Scott mentioned, the DPW building was rejected at the polls, and it was a solution to two problems: the admin building and the fleet storage. As a newcomer to the Finance Committee, I feel there is a bit of friction around this, and I think that, at least speaking for myself, I think we're generally aligned with the objectives of the DPW project. I think the latest proposal addresses the staffing solution and providing a new building, but leaves the existing structure in place for equipment storage, and I wanted to explore that a little bit. I think there's evidence that we may be able to meet almost all the goals at a cost which is lower than the latest estimate, although there are some big asterisks there, by right-sizing the equipment storage and possibly using a different building approach or a different, I guess, quality on the scale of prefab buildings. And so I think we should review these options a bit more and see if we can come to closer alignment with everyone involved. So, as I mentioned, I think I pulled this straight from the DPW site. I think like I said, I think we're all aligned on most of these. It seems like vehicle washing stations generally been pushed aside by all parties. I do think, in the future, I think we should always have cost considerations in as part of our goals, but that's something to deal with another day. But I think we can work together on a plan that meets the town's needs and is hopefully more economical. So let me start with the admin, and like I said, like Scott said, I'm just going to touch on this briefly and then spend most of the other 5 or 8 minutes on the fleet storage part of this, which I have more content on. So, looking at some of the prefab buildings and the plans that, I was sent or that were on the DPW building, perhaps there are, on the spectrum of prefab steel buildings, there are more economical options, and at least prelim searching around based on experience and some discussions, I think that something around, a concrete building with 8,000 square feet would be, $750,000 to $1 million, and then to finish that, $9 to $11 million. Now, I will say, like I mentioned, the asterisk is, I'm not including site demo or prep or the actual adjustment for prevailing wage requirements or environmental requirements in there, though I I did bump it, yeah, I have bumped it up by 10 to 30% for these estimates. So taking a look at the fleet storage, I took the list of the vehicles on the DPW site. I was just curious about what the cost of these are, and so I did a little bit of investigation of what these various vehicles would cost to replace. Some of them aren't available anymore, so I just took an estimate of replacement value where I could. And I believe we have, based on these estimates, let's say $4.5 to $5 million of vehicle equipment. Now, focusing on then my approach was, let's take a look at the most valuable pieces of equipment in here. So that's what I did. The dump trucks, the trucks, some of the loaders and the sweepers, just to see what the requirements were for those types of equipment. So I took an approach two ways. One was calling some service managers in the New England area, and second, looking at operator manuals where I could get them. And I think that a climate-controlled building is the platinum option here. And with practically, whether it was Mack Truck Service or CAT or our street sweepers, et cetera, I didn't see much evidence and hear much evidence that we need a climate-controlled facility. But maintenance is key, and as Roland mentioned, yes, there can be diesel gelling and things like that. There are definitely options on doing this and how we store our equipment. So I think that, one, we can reduce the footprint size, but two, I don't think we necessarily need to invest in a climate-controlled facility, because, to be frank, a lot of these pieces of equipment are meant to just sit outside, but maintenance is key. The one thing that is probably a bit more temperamental are the street sweepers. It seems like there just needs a bit more winterization. Some components need to be stored inside, et cetera. So maybe there are some pieces that at least a covered building would be, in my opinion, appropriate for. So, summarizing all of this, I think all of this equipment is durable, and as long as we have water, pest management, battery keep up, general cleaning and maintenance, those are the key factors. And so I sort of laid this out in platinum, gold, silver, and bronze, and I think that doing the platinum, steel, climate-controlled building could be a little bit much, and I think a lot of the goals that were outlined on the DPW site are addressed with a building such as this. So I took a look at a 20,000 square foot building with 4-person doors, two large doors, all based on Middlesex wind, snow requirements and things like this. And I think a simpler building with no mezzanine, maybe the knee walls and things around it are simpler, just the stainless steel corrugated outside gives all of the equipment a lot of protection and would be quite suitable. Again, site demo prep, possible adjustment for prevailing wage. I did not do this in my several hours of research and calls, so that would have to be drilled down a little bit. But all of this to say is, I think there like I said, on the spectrum of item or of steel prefab buildings, there could be something that we could get to where it meets all of our needs, and I would, me personally, I'd like to see it in the teens, millions of teens to, get, and I think we could get good support for that. So all of that to say is my hypothesis is that we can meet everything and get to a cost in the mid-teens. I think we should reconfigure the fleet storage based on service experts, which would mean reducing some of the costs, such as heated bays or just a vast heated storage area. And I think that we could do this with a combination of inside and outside storage. So I'll pause there for next steps. This is just what I threw down, but for questions, and happy to talk about this a little bit deeper.
All right, so let me just start by saying thank you for doing the deep dive. I think there's been a lot of conversations on this topic. For me, the value that I'm getting out of your presentation is your analysis on the actual equipment itself, because I didn't have time to dive into that. So I don't know, I'll see what the team says, but I have thoughts, but I don't know, does anybody ever want to speak? Greg, you're probably the most appropriate one to talk first.
I can go last.
Well, I just think because you're on the other committee, so
Oh,
yeah, it
okay.
makes sense for you to go.
Fred, hi, good to meet you.
Hello.
When you were collecting your data, were you looking at private construction or public construction?
Well, that's where I'm asterisking. I'm assuming you're going to the prevailing wage question, or?
Actually, it's not even the prevailing wage. It's the filed subbid law. Public construction law in Massachusetts drives up the cost of all public construction compared to private. I was on a legislative committee back in 1980 when they tried to reform it.
Yeah.
It was the Ward Commission. And one of the things that we discovered is that most of the construction law in Massachusetts was created in the 1930s. And a whole lot of it has not changed. So that, for example, when you want to build any public construction, whether it's a DPW building or it's the high school in Lexington, or you pick it, you need to get 18 filed sub-bids from subcontractors, one of whom does masonry, one of whom does HVAC. And part of that then has to be coordinated. It's one of the reasons why this committee pushed for faster construction rather than phased construction, because keeping those 18 subcontractors coordinated so that the left hand is doing what the right hand needs to do at the right time, so you're not paying people to sit around, is a challenge. But one of the consequences is that if you then use what I would call private construction numbers in the estimates, it violates state law, which was guaranteed to be inefficient and expensive and delayed, and they had a chance to change it in 1980 and didn't.
Understood. Well, I'm not going out, I certainly am not going out and getting detailed quotes or anything like that. But aside from, like I said, the union wages, my understanding on discussions were in network were for public works, were for public works projects.
Because the other thing that the DPW Building Committee discussed while we were trying to understand the costs, and by the way, if we could come up with a $15 million solution, I'd be delighted.
That's,
No, I just, you know, I'm not against lowering the cost. This is a good thing. Coming up with a lower cost that is then also a viable solution is the interesting challenge.
yeah.
And again, all we have is anecdotal evidence. We do not have what I would call a good state number to work with. But of the 18 subcontractors in the construction industry, many of them have a high percentage of immigrant labor that is now hiding from ICE.
Okay, that could
And
be,
therefore, getting people at, quote, prevailing wages, you're lucky if you can get people. So there are a variety of things that, you know, yeah, can we get the price down? That would be great. If we can figure out that we don't need everything that we're asking for, that's fine. But one of the things I would like to encourage everybody here is, at some point, we need to talk to our state legislators about taking a second hard look at that public construction law, because we're not the only town that is facing
yeah,
out-of-control costs.
understood. And the labor issues with ICE is certainly not, if that changes the cost, that's certainly not in here.
Thanks, Fred. Option, I think, 4B has, think about an 18,000 square foot vehicle storage facility, and the site work was estimated at $3 million by our street. So that's one number you're missing.
Oh, yeah, no.
In terms of the options, I mean, yeah, we had whatever, 6 options on the Arrow Street. 5, whatever. But, yeah. Well, 1 wasn't really on, but anyway.
Okay, there were 10 if we want to count everything we counted.
But if you took option 2, which was the cheap option, but it did renovate the existing building up to code, and then you took 4B, and instead of building an 18,000 square foot vehicle storage, you did a half-size 9,000 vehicle storage, you would probably wind up with a number that was under 20.
Yeah.
And that all is supposedly factoring in prevailing wage. Because those are Arrow Street numbers, they're not mine.
Yeah, understood.
So I think there's ways to get the number down. I think roughly, if you still could do, if under option 2, you could still do 12 vehicles in the existing building. And I think the 18,000 square foot building did.
It was 48, I believe.
It's 4B, I forget how many. 18 maybe vehicles in total. So if you have that, you got 9 out of a freestanding building on option 2, then you have 21 vehicles. So 3 more vehicles. Yeah. So I think there's some work we need to do on this, as opposed to accepting one of these proposals. But thank you, Fred.
There's a question for Greg. Greg, did the building committee look at prefab options?
I'm sorry, I missed your question.
Oh, did the building committee look at or discuss at any point prefab options?
Oh, we did not, that I'm aware of. I joined the committee about, what, a year ago? But I don't recall us discussing any prefab options.
Yeah, I believe the plans up that are prefab construction, or prefab steel construction buildings.
4B was 18 vehicles.
Mr. Chair, may I respond? Throughout the project, we looked at a number, or throughout the building committee meetings, we looked at a number of different construction buildings and types. And one of the options that we did look at early in the process were prefab buildings. And I've been trying to search, and I can't remember what the name is, but DPWs they're deemed as an emergency response entity of the town, and the buildings have to be rated as such. And some of the buildings that you showed, and Fred, and I'm not totally sure, some of them look like maybe temporary storage facilities for some vehicles that are unheated or cooled. I couldn't see all that well. But those we found from Weston and Sampson do not meet that rating in that building code. So the buildings that we were looking at had to be different. We couldn't go with prefab so that we can ensure that the facilities were standing in the event of a 100-year storm or a major hurricane or something like that.
Well, these buildings would be built to, so I'm not too sure where that's coming from, because you can get prefab buildings that are rated for the snow, the wind, everything like that. So 100-year storm, that's all part of it.
Sure. So the ratings for snow load, like your roof.
Yeah.
There's different requirements inside of a building for emergency services. Similar to the PSF, it had to meet certain building requirements because it's emergency response.
What's the load on an emergency building?
I don't have that in front of me, but
Okay,
some of the meetings.
wind rating?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, what's the wind rating?
I don't have that in front of me, Fred.
Okay.
But some of the meetings that we had previously with Weston and Sampson and some of the studies that were put out do have some of that information. I can work to provide that for you.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
So, question, Tom, that discussion took place before I got on the committee? Or was I snoozing?
I believe you may have been there, but I could be wrong.
I could have been
Greg.
snoozing. Okay, well, I will fess up if I was. Maybe I was on a cruise.
I'm sorry, Tom, I just want to summarize what you said. Prefab buildings were looked at, recognizing that they are a cheaper option, but they do not meet whatever code level is needed they do not meet the needs to make it be the emergency level that we need the building to be.
That's correct.
So we have to do custom made.
That's from what we understood.
Thank you.
This is for Greg. Is that the type of issue that might have been discussed in trying to redo the regulations in 1980? Or what is?
Oh, the Ward Commission.
Like that, that type of requirement that would preclude you from using a prefabricated, is that the type of?
Prefab was not the issue. Prefab was not the issue.
Okay, but okay.
Even in 1980.
Okay.
It was, the key issue is, could a general contractor put together a team that would then build the building? And the answer was not unless they had 18 subcontractors, all of whom were in specified categories. And that's not prefab, that's.
Just all labor stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
But then my question is we could put a lot more out in just store it outside. I'm not too sure why that would trip any emergency requirements there.
Does that conclude your presentation, Fred?
Yeah, if there's nothing else, yes,
All
it
right.
does.
I'm going to make myself the presenter, if that's okay. If there's any other questions for
I
Fred,
actually-
let's continue. Allison?
This is more of a timing question. So do we know at what date a final DPW plan needs to be ready to present at town meeting? Is it something that can be worked on up until the book is published or the warrant is published? Or is there a different date that needs to be targeted? Because
They're asking for $900,000 to come back with another plan, to come back with another, 70% schematic or whatever it is. So they won't even have they're asking for another round of money to come up with another set of schematics similar to last time. So this is asking for money to move forward with the DPW plan as was, the 4B option as was voted by the DPW building committee. So they're not looking to make any changes.
I know one of the concerns expressed by Fran specifically is that the current plan as presented is insufficient. What I think I heard from Fred's presentation there is that the smaller, the use of the current building as less storage than was originally asked for is sufficient, because not all of the equipment needs to be stored inside that was part of the initial plan. So in my mind, this has actually made me more comfortable with that change. It's not that we are inherently doing a less building because we can't afford the more. I mean, we are doing less building because we can't afford more, but we're not, it's not that we should wait 5 years until we can afford the big thing. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on that? I know we're at 9 o'clock. We have a couple more things to do before the night's out, but is there any other thoughts on DPW before I move on? You and then Jason.
Have we voted as a committee on which option we support? Or if
We are not, we haven't voted on anything.
Okay, thanks. I was wondering if I missed something.
But I do think we should have a sense of the committee vote tonight on if we're comfortable moving forward with a $29 million project. Because, all this about having to have 19 sub-bids, whatever, all that speaks to making sure that what we build is, I believe what we'd call the minimum viable product. I still have not seen an analysis that satisfies me that we need new mechanical bays. We have mechanical bays. Why are we putting in new ones? Why are we putting in new mechanical bays without having done a fulsome analysis of what would happen if we were to outsource our maintenance, just like we do on our fire trucks, which really are emergency vehicles? I still say this scope is too high, and I believe that, one of the things that Fred said that I absolutely stand behind is we absolutely want to help the set of deplorable bathrooms and restrooms and break rooms and whatnot. But the shop spaces that's asked for in 4B and the mechanical rooms that are asked for in 4B are the enemy of the good here. Let's get to the smallest viable, reasonable project that's not going to be approaching, I'll stick to 29. I won't even round up to 30 million. As was quoted out by the DPW project. So I do think, Mr. Chairman, I do think we do need to have a sense of the committee as to whether or not we want to move forward at $29 million, or if we would like to suggest that they not take $900,000 and do another schematic, that they actually step back and listen to our concerns about getting this significantly down in cost, sub 15 million. So.
All right. Myself personally, there is still one data point I'm trying to dig through before I'm comfortable doing anything on a vote perspective. I'm happy to bring this up at our next meeting again for discussion, but if the committee wants to do what they want to do. But if we were to vote tonight, I would abstain because I'd need more information. That would just be where I would be.
Are we talking about this a little now? Because I have a question for Greg. As someone who took part in the discussions about this, if we were to maintain our current work bays, do they meet actual health working conditions? My understanding is that there's a lack of ventilation through that area, and that it is not necessarily healthy air quality within the current building.
Yeah, and I think even Fred's presentation says basically we are dealing with the need for a new facility for the employees, both for safety reasons and also.
But I'm saying inclusive of the work base. Jason was saying that we have functional work base, so we should stick with those.
The good news is by separating the two buildings, basically the new building versus the renovation for the fleet storage, that problem is minimized. So, are they?
Hold on, unless I'm misunderstanding Jason, that problem, those work bays are now in the new building.
The work bays, yes.
Yes, and Jason, I thought, was saying we should keep the current work bays,
That is
which
what I'm
means
saying.
they're not in the new building. That makes the new building smaller. But I'm wondering if we're then having health issues by keeping the work bays in the old
Well,
building.
Jason, actually, if I'm correct, was suggesting we don't need them at all, or that we can farm them out like we do with the fire apparatus. And I think we did discuss that, and what we determined, and this is like, there's no one answer that's always right. If you have to get your fire engine fixed occasionally, then having someone you can outsource it to is the right way to go. If you have equipment that is constantly being worked on, then you actually are more cost-effective to keep that in-house. And so that was the driving issue behind, yeah, we probably need a couple work bays. And whether they are in the garage or they're in the facility where the employees are, was just the designs that we had in front of us.
Since I'm right here, to answer, my comment was, leave the mechanical bays where they are. I don't have an answer to your question about if the mechanical bays have appropriate ventilation or if that can be remediated at a significantly cheaper cost than all the reasons that we've just heard about why building anything new is so incredibly expensive. It's got to be cheaper to put in a ventilation fan than to completely rebuild these things. And it's probably even better yet if we can have a maintenance agreement externally. Either way, I'd love to see the analysis rather than just say we need to have the latest and greatest, everything new. If we get the office space removed from the current building, that leaves more space for the shops. Again, don't need that in a new building. When I was asked last year by a former finance committee member why we're not supporting the last all-in-wonder building, it's because I said, because I want to address basically the locker rooms and bathrooms and break room question in the most cost-effective manner, which is build a small building. What they came back with in 4B is just about everything they asked for before. It's still too much. It still needs to come down. Does that clarify my position?
Your position has been clear to me all along. I was
Okay.
trying to ask Greg whether there was a reason that your position wouldn't work with keeping the work bays over where they were.
I participated in a discussion at a DPW building meeting that was held 2 stories down in that back little room. And one of the things that we came to the table with was an agreement on 3 key issues. If we're going to evaluate the 5 options that are before us, one has to be affordability, one has to be longevity, because if we're going to build something for 5 years and then have to rebuild it again, that's not a solution. And the third one is it has to be functional. It has to solve a functional problem. In that room, everybody gave ground. It was surprising that people who a year earlier said it's either this or that basically moved to a middle position. Now, one of the things that I've heard since is that your middle position is still too expensive. And the answer is okay, but that was what option 4B was. The other option we had, the total renovation one, was not viable. So it may be minimum, but it was not viable. Now, I think I mentioned at one of these finance committee meetings that we had a $12 million option, we had a $29 million option, we had a $33 million option, et cetera. We were missing something in the 20-ish range, but we didn't have that option in front of us. So I'm not an architect, I'm not a designer, and in looking at the options that were there, 4B seemed like a reasonable framework for moving forward, and I would stick with that today.
Well, when Outer Street was here presenting options, I asked them the specific question if option 2, the $11 million option, solved all of our code issues, and they said that did. So I don't see why we can't leave the bays where they are. And like I just said, we add on another vehicle storage building, and we're still under $20 million. So I think there is a $20 million just by manipulating Arrow Street's numbers, which should be reflective of prevailing wage and emergency standards. If not, we didn't get much for our money.
So fire department has less vehicles than the DPW by far. And I know how long it takes when I need to get my vehicle work done, how long it takes to get an appointment to get it done. So having in-house mechanics makes a lot of sense for the DPW, may not make sense for the fire department. So maintaining equipment like that and having that in-house where you have, I don't know how many trucks you had up there, Fred, how many dump trucks, and then it's also the front-end loaders and the other equipment that goes along with it, generators, et cetera. So for me, that makes a lot of sense. I would like to see the mechanic space stay within the building they're in now, and the shop stay in there. And if it's doing the ventilation systems over it, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than building onto another building and just have the admin building be the admin building. You can renovate bathrooms for the shops too, as well, in that building, and obviously have bathroom facilities for the admin building as well. So I do like 4B. I still think there could be some work done on that to make it a little bit more functional, and just having the building that's there now, you'll pick up 18 spaces roughly, but maybe you won't with keeping the shops there, but you'll pick up more, and that should solve the problem. And again, is what I've said before, is the seasonal equipment that you don't use in the off-season, you can store in another garage, that doesn't necessarily need to be heated. The street sweepers, well, we don't use them in the winter. You couldn't use them this past week. It was snowing out. So if we close one of the fire stations, you can store them in that building. That's a garage. So I think there are pieces of equipment like that we could store at other facilities within the town that we don't need and doesn't need to be stored in there, and thus keeping the shops where they are, and just fix the ventilation, the other issues with that part of the building, and have a new admin building.
Or some of them can just be put outside. But I think we should solve for like the 18 million, like what, I can't swallow I just think there's something creative or something interesting we can do that solves our problem or, addresses everyone's needs, to frame it a different way, that is less than 20, let's say in that 15 to 20 million. And I have a hard time believing we can't find a solution that does that.
Mr. Chairman, back in September, I think, when you laid out the process for getting to agreement on the DPW building, one of the prerequisites was for us to agree on a long-range fiscal plan with the Board of Selectmen. There's been no progress, to my knowledge, on that. We would need a forecast of at least 5 or 6 significant line items in detail, which I believe, I don't think I'm quite at a year waiting for that request to be honored, but we're getting pretty close to a year. Personally, I'm not going to vote in favor of any DPW project until I see that.
Any other comments? All right, so it looks like we're going to pick this up at our next meeting as well. Seeing the time, and I did want to go through more than 2 topics tonight. It's okay if I proceed? No one's objecting. Finally, the school made a decision this week to, I think it's the 5-2. 5V2 proposal, and as we discussed in the prior week, that there's, both final plans had the same financial impact. Do we have any liaison comments on this?
Both final plans have the same first-year financial impact. The one they went with has more flexibility to respond to changes in the population over time, therefore has a more sustainable future. It's not simply cutting a school back, it's actually making it so that they can grow and shrink class sizes based on demographic changes.
And we have an ALG meeting Thursday morning, 7:30. And so I'm sure I'm going to see an updated financial plan from the school and the town, which I'll share at our next meeting. You all see it in advance, obviously, but go ahead, Greg.
It actually, Peter Light presented a preliminary fiscal '27 budget immediately after the vote on which option they were taking, and oh, by the way, what model they were going to use in terms of determining how students get assigned to schools, which is going to be geographic, so they had 2 votes there. And his preliminary budget was $121.3 million, which is up 3.69% year over year. And so that number was made public that night. And, he also indicated during the meeting that there may be it could be just under $1 million one-time implementation cost, which they think they can fund out of their deficiency funds rather than impacting the operating budget, because there's a number of things they're going to try to implement. Literally, as we are speaking, they started, I went over to try to get a copy of the slides the following morning. They were already working on the implementation process, so they're hard at work. The one other number that we may want to focus on, which was also presented by the superintendent last Thursday night, was the assessment to both Acton and Boxborough. And Acton's assessment was $82.8 million, and Boxborough's was $17.7 million. And so again, a whole lot of those numbers were made public during the meeting.
All right, sounds like I have some catching up to do. Thank you, Greg. Any other comment? Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Now that they have made a decision, and in light of what Steve was saying earlier, part of my lack of support for the DPW last year was because of not knowing if we had an override coming this year and the financial uncertainty. I recognize the desire for the new DPW and agree with the need that the workers have, but without some help from the town to understand its financial future, I can't support the DPW at this point, and that is not how I want to be making a decision. I want to make a decision about the DPW based on its merit, not based on a lack of information. But if it's taken us this long to get the things we've asked for, we have a problem, and I would hope that you would discuss that at ALG.
Any other comments, Corinne?
So the last spreadsheet I saw, they got the FY27 deficit down quite a bit. I think it's like in the 300,000 to 400,000 or something like that range. But then it looks like both the town and the schools pushed it's like the snake eating the mouse. They just pushed the problem out a year, and so now it's a $7 million deficit in FY28. That's the type of long-range plan that Steve has been asking for. It's the same thing. It's I want to see the town and the schools plan to have a sustainable budget. And if there isn't one, tell us if there's going to be an override, because if we know that, it's going to impact the decision on the DPW. It's all together. So that's, again, like I said, how are they going to deal with that $7 million problem next year? Because that's a big problem.
All right, our school committee member, liaison, had some thoughts for us. I was going to give her the mic for a couple seconds. Let her, she's been waiting for a bit to get up.
There's normally a mic there, so hello, just here to answer any questions. You did a great job of summarizing what happened in the recent vote with going towards 5v2 and having an upper and lower elementary school in both of the twin buildings, the Parker Damon building and the Boardwalk campus. K through 3 and then 4 through 6 would be how those upper and lowers would be done respectively, and then in each of those buildings, and with geographic enrollment. So that was all summarized nicely, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think one of the things I was going to circle back to, I think people had questions about some of the particulars in the budget, and I just wanted to give everyone an update and reminder that our budget Monday is on February 9th. So there's still a lot to be determined in that budget Monday. And as the AB forward process is in terms of the decision part of that has concluded, as you've definitely referenced the fact, and you, Greg, that there's a lot of work to be done. There was actually a webinar this evening for our parents and caregivers to attend, and there will be bi-weekly meetings continuing on for parents and caregivers to attend who have questions. And there will also be one hosted by our special education director as well. So multiple opportunities for families to gain information. And the AB Forward portion of the school district website is still up for people to get information, look things over if they have questions. And there's also a link for people to ask questions directly. And as always, people are always welcomed to and encouraged to email the school committee and Peter for any other questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for her?
I do.
Go ahead.
I watched the meeting on Thursday, and I think I heard the superintendent say, or maybe it was the deputy superintendent, that they would engage a consultant to draw the boundaries for the geographic. So when does that get started, and how long does that take?
This week.
Okay.
And families are going to be notified of their place, specifically elementary school placement was in April. Looks like April 27th. Student placement decisions will be sent to the families of grades 1 through 6, resulting from the geographic lines being drawn.
Do we know if the geographic enrollment was going to be phased? Did they make a decision on that?
The geographic enrollment will not be phased. It was just decided by the school committee to just have geographic enrollment. However, there are lots of attachments and packets uploaded to the January 22nd agenda for Peter's mitigation I'd say strategies and ways that they're going to group students together in cohorts. So once families are notified of those placements, families and caregivers are encouraged to talk to others who have the same placement, and then they can start grouping students together in cohorts. This is one of the many mitigation strategies to be able to mitigate the effects of that transition. And with the timeline and implementation that's also listed in that January 22nd agenda, there, within the timeline, there's lots of school building tours, opportunities for more vulnerable students, and then the webinars that I mentioned, and opportunities for caregivers and parents to get together. So there's a lot of stuff in there, and I really encourage anyone who is concerned to look into that, because there's a lot there, more than I can even get into tonight.
Hi. This is kind of a add-on to what the comment I just made to Scott. And so that it's widely recognized that this reorganization is not going to, in and of itself, put the school district on a path towards a sustainable budget. It definitely helps. So I guess what I hope to hear, via ALG or something is what's the school's plan to get there? And so maybe you can pass that back to them or to your budget subcommittee or something. Thank you.
Great question, and happy to, excited for that Budget Monday and going over more of those details later to make those determinations, because those are great questions. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for coming up. I'm going to move on to our next topic. All right, so I'll go through this quick. Basically, over the last couple of years in my experience in Finance Committee, I've listened to surveys and sample sizes of surveys be referenced and then referenced as being directive for representing the entire town. So I just wanted to cover what a sample size needs to be for the town. Regardless of how you measure the town, whether you measure the population based on the male census, whether you measure households, measure the population that was referenced previously that includes everybody, or even if we're higher than we expect to be. No matter how you do the math, using 95% confident interval, 5% margin of error, you end up between 360 and 380 of a sample size. And a sample, a good sample is one that's large enough to accurately represent the population and small enough to be practical while achieving the desired statistical power, precision, and reliability. So you can't take a pool of all the parents of soccer players and then have that be representative of the town. So the sample needs to be 375, and I would say probably ideally 400 for it to be meaningful. So if we ever have a survey presented and it represents, and they say it represents the town, it needs to represent the town, and it needs to be at least 400 people. If it's less than that, it shouldn't be referenced as being directive. That's my point on that. Do you have any questions on that?
The last point on this slide is probably the most important. Even if it is 400, it has to be random. Like, it can't be, or else there's just like inherent. That's tough. I mean, so I don't know what your experiences is, but that's critical in in this.
Well, oddly enough, 375 to 400 is pretty close to what we usually get in an annual town meeting. However, having chaired the Town Meeting Improvement Committee a few years ago and done extensive research on the attendees, I can assure you it is not random.
All right. So unless everybody wants to kill this one, talk about this more, I'll move on, because I know it's getting late. I'll do one liaison report. The health insurance trust is they're getting half the money back, like $250 back. There's another $250 that we can get at the end of it, and that money is going to be split between the town and schools. Approximately, I think the school gets 78% and the town gets 22%. But it's basically in wind down. Any other liaison reports? We already covered the schools. All right, moving on. Minutes. I sent around the last meeting. Everybody has reviewed them. If there are any edits to the minutes, can I get a motion then to approve these?
You want them all at once, or one at a time? One at a time is probably the best.
One at a time, please.
Yeah, I move approval of the October 14th minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? All right, that declared passed. All
I
right.
move approval of the October 22nd minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? All right, that's passed.
I move approval of the October 28th minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That's passed.
I move approval of the November 13th minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
And I move approval of the November 25th minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Oh, you're opposed? Oh, that's passed. All right.
I think we also need a vote on the September 23rd meeting minutes as
Okay,
well.
all right, so let's do that.
I move approval of the September 23rd minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? That's passed. Thank you. And next meeting, not a problem, February. I did put in for the meetings for all of 2026, barring the building being closed and having all those meetings relocated. The March 10th meeting, I could not get ActonTV or this room. So we have to, at our next meeting, can we look at our calendars and figure out what we want to do on March, either we want to keep it on March 10th, or I can see if we can move it to a different day.
There's the library, there's the public safety facility.
And there's also the recreation building.
Okay.
There's
All right,
there's a spot.
All right, I'll see if I can find an alternative spot. ActonTV's,
Well,
it's not ActonTV.
Where will we be in the warrant discussion at that point? Is that a meeting that needs to be televised? If we're discussing warrant articles,
Oh, that's
it
what I was
does.
thinking. I was trying to get everything televised. ActonTV is not available on the 10th.
Again, public safety facility's been able to be televised, and so is the library.
Okay, all right, so I'll check both public safety and, all right. So I am set with my agenda, unless there's something else. I'm going to look at Fred and hope he says the right thing.
Yeah. Move to adjourn the meeting.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.